The October wind sliced through Morgan Hayes's thin pajamas as she stood barefoot on the concrete driveway, clutching a black garbage bag filled with hastily stuffed clothes. Her toes curled against the cold tears streaming down her face as she stared at the darkened house before her. Just minutes ago, it had been her home. Now the locked door and drawn curtains transformed it into a fortress she could no longer enter. 16 years of being a daughter had vanished in an instant. The porch light flickered off, leaving her in darkness. Morgan shivered not just from the cold, but from the shock of what had just happened. Her father's final words still rang in her ears. "Take this and go. This house doesn't harbor thieves." But the most painful part wasn't her father's rage or the icy concrete beneath her bare feet. It was the moment her mother simply nodded in agreement, clutching Morgan's younger sister Zoe to her chest, as if Morgan were the danger they needed protection from. That silent nod had cut deeper than any shouted accusation. Morgan took one last look at the two-story colonial, where she'd spent her entire life, then turned away, her garbage bag bumping against her leg as she walked. She had nowhere to go, but staying wasn't an option. The street lamps cast long shadows as she made her way down the suburban Cincinnati street, each step sending pain shooting from her bare feet up through her legs. $300. That was the amount her sister claimed Morgan had stolen from their father's wallet. $300 that Morgan had never touched, but had somehow ended up under her pillow, discovered when her father tore apart her room in a rage. $300 that had transformed her from beloved daughter to street garbage in the span of 20 minutes. The memory played in her mind like a film reel stuck on repeat. She had been editing photos for her latest project when her bedroom door burst open. Her father's face was flushed with anger. Her mother right behind him, Zoe sobbing into her hands. "I saw her take money from Dad's wallet," Zoe had cried, her shoulders shaking. "I was so scared. I didn't dare tell anyone, but now I can't keep it in anymore." Morgan's heart had plummeted. "What, Zoe? What are you saying? I never—" But her father wasn't listening. He lunged at her bed, flipping over pillows and blankets, shoving his arm down between the mattress. And then, as if it had been scripted, he pulled out a crumpled stack of bills and threw it onto the floor, his eyes blazing with both anger and contempt. "Here! The proof is right here! Still want to deny it!" It felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her. Morgan knew she had never touched her father's wallet, never even thought of it. Yet somehow the money was in her room under her pillow, as if she had hidden it herself. She had collapsed to her knees, clutching the edge of the bed, her lips trembling. I didn't do it, I swear. Someone put it there." Zoe pressed against their mother, tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling. "I'm scared of her dad. So many times she snapped at me, her eyes wide like she wanted to hit me. I didn't dare say anything, but I know she's capable of anything." She spoke, then buried her head against their mother's shoulder, but not before Morgan caught a flicker in her eyes. A flash so quick no one else would notice. A gleam of triumph. In that moment, Morgan understood everything. She turned to her mother, eyes pleading, begging for understanding. But Rebecca Hayes stayed silent, her face, tense lips pressed tight. Then she gave that small nod to Morgan's father, sealing the verdict. Morgan shook the memory away as she walked, focusing instead on navigating the dark streets. Her mind struggled to form a plan. She couldn't go to the police. What 16-year-old would be believed over two respected adults? Her father, William Hayes, was a marketing director at a pharmaceutical company. Her mother, a well-known event manager for charity foundations. They were pillars of the community, while she was just a teenager with a garbage bag. The temperature dropped further as Morgan reached Smale Riverfront Park, where she'd often come to take photographs of the Ohio River. She found a bench partially sheltered by trees and sat down, pulling her knees to her chest. The Cincinnati skyline glittered across the water, beautiful and indifferent to her plight. "Thought I might see you here again." Morgan startled at the gruff voice. A figure emerged from the shadows, an older man with a weathered face and kind eyes. She recognized him instantly. Henry, a homeless veteran she'd photographed for her award-winning series on urban invisibility. "Henry," she whispered, relief washing over her. "Taking more pictures tonight?" he asked, then noticed her bare feet, her pajamas, the garbage bag. His expression changed. "What happened to you, kid?" The story spilled out of Morgan in broken sentences. Henry listened without interrupting, then shook his head. "World's full of people who won't see what's right in front of them," he said finally. "Come on, can't stay here tonight. Too open, too cold. I know a spot." Morgan hesitated only briefly before following him. Henry led her to a small alcove near the riverbank, where several other homeless people had gathered around a small, carefully controlled fire. They looked up as Henry approached with Morgan. "This here's the photographer girl," Henry explained. "She's in a bad way tonight. Needs a place." An elderly woman with silver hair nodded and shifted to make room. "I'm Gloria, former nurse before medical bills took everything. Welcome to the invisible world, honey." Morgan sat in silence, the reality of her situation sinking in. She was now one of the invisible people she'd photographed, homeless, vulnerable, discarded. The irony wasn't lost on her. That night, huddled by the fire, Morgan drifted in and out of sleep. When she did sleep, she dreamed she was standing outside her house, knocking on the door. Inside, she could hear her parents laughing and talking happily with Zoe, as if Morgan had never existed. She screamed and cried, but her voice was nothing more than wind dissolving into nothingness. She jolted awake, heart-pounding, cold sweat breaking across her forehead. The darkness still surrounded her, but it wasn't a dream. It was the raw, unshakable truth. When the first light of dawn filtered through the city skyline, Morgan found herself still huddled near the dying embers of the fire, her legs numb, her toes cracked and bluish. She had never imagined greeting the first morning of her homeless life this way. And the cruelest part wasn't the cold or the hunger. It was the truth that she had been thrown away by her own family, as if she had never been their daughter at all. The favoritism in the Hayes household hadn't appeared overnight. It had been a slow-growing vine, gradually strangling Morgan's sense of belonging since she was young. She remembered when she was 8 years old, attending a birthday party for a classmate. Watching other parents interact with their children, she first realized that something was different about her family. The casual affection, the warm glances, the gentle guidance, these were things she rarely experienced at home. That evening, when her friend's father scooped up his daughter and spun her around, Morgan felt a pang in her chest she couldn't name. When she got home and accidentally spilled water on William's work documents, his reaction confirmed what she'd observed. His face contorted in rage as he towered over her. "Are you completely useless? Do you know how important these papers are?" She had trembled, apologizing over and over, while her mother simply stood in the doorway saying nothing. Later that night, Morgan overheard her parents talking in hushed tones. "You were too harsh with her, William." "She needs discipline, Rebecca. She's too much like my mother, head always in the clouds, always drawing or taking pictures. That dreamy nonsense won't get her anywhere in life." "She's just a child." "Exactly. And children need guidance. Strong guidance. I won't let her grow up thinking the world revolves around her artistic whims." Morgan had crept back to her room, a new understanding forming. She was a disappointment to her father, because she reminded him of someone else, his mother, the woman who had raised him alone after his father abandoned them, who had worked multiple jobs while pursuing her passion for painting. As Morgan grew older, the contrast in how her parents treated her and Zoe became increasingly obvious. When Zoe was 11, she'd knocked over an expensive crystal vase during one of William's important dinner parties with pharmaceutical executives. The crash interrupted William's pitch about a new marketing strategy, drawing all eyes to the shattered glass on the hardwood floor. Morgan, 14 at the time, had tensed, waiting for the explosion of anger that would surely follow. Instead, William had merely sighed. "It's okay, sweetheart. Accidents happen. Go help your mother get the broom." Later that same month, Morgan had forgotten to bring her science project when William was driving her to school for a critical presentation. They were halfway there when she realized her mistake. "Dad, we need to go back. I forgot my project." William's knuckles had whitened on the steering wheel. "Are you serious? I specifically reminded you last night to have everything ready." "I know, I'm sorry, Do you have any idea how important this meeting is that I'm going to be late for now? This is exactly what I'm talking about, Morgan. Responsibility, follow through. These are the things that matter in life, not your photographs and daydreams." The difference was stark. Zoe's mistakes were accidents. Morgan's were character flaws. Perhaps it was because Zoe excelled in the areas William valued. She was methodical, practical, excelling in mathematics and science. Morgan was creative, intuitive, with a talent for photography that captured the emotional essence of her subjects. William saw Zoe as following in his footsteps. Morgan was a reminder of what he'd fought against his entire life, the artistic and practical nature he associated with struggle and disappointment. When Morgan won first place in a statewide art competition at 15, her photograph of Cincinnati's homeless community displayed at the city's central library, her mother had offered only a faint smile. "That's nice, probably just lucky." Meanwhile, when Zoe was cast as a minor role in the school play, their parents flooded social media with photos writing, "Our little girl is a born star." Morgan sat in the dark staring at that post, feeling her heart tighten. It was painfully clear their recognition always tilted to one side, no matter who had truly worked harder. Not only in academics, but even in the smallest daily matters, the scales always tipped toward Zoe. If Zoe broke something, Morgan was called to clean it up. If Zoe skipped washing the dishes, Morgan was forced to finish the chore. In her parents' eyes, Morgan was the child who had to take the shield to cover every mistake Zoe made. Morgan once tried to fight back, blurting out, "Why is it always my fault?" William had roared, his hand slamming onto the table so hard it rattled the entire kitchen. "Don't be disrespectful. As the older daughter, you're supposed to take responsibility." That sentence engraved itself into Morgan's memory, binding her to carry not only her own mistakes, but also those of someone else. Yet the paradox was this: even though Zoe was favored at home, she was always jealous of Morgan at school. Morgan never tried to become the center of attention, but somehow her quiet diligence made teachers appreciate her and classmates trust her. When Morgan joined the photography club and won a creativity award, the principal mentioned her name during the morning assembly. Zoe, who attended the same school, stood among the students as Morgan walked up to the stage to receive her certificate. Morgan caught a glimpse of her eyes flashing with a bitterness she could not hide. Later at home, Zoe sneered, "All you do is take pictures of dirty homeless people. What's the point?" Morgan stayed silent, but deep inside she knew that envy was far from small. The weight of everything piled up, creating a gap that grew wider every year. When Zoe received a brand new MacBook for her birthday to support her studies, Morgan received only a notebook with the reminder, "Learn to save." Morgan cherished that notebook, filling it with emotions and sketches. But she couldn't deny the sting she felt when she saw Zoe showing off her computer to her friends. To outsiders, they may have looked like a perfectly normal family, but Morgan knew the truth. She was nothing more than a shadow. More and more, Morgan began to understand that favoritism isn't simply about giving one person special treatment. It is also about completely erasing the other. She existed, but as if invisible. Every effort was diminished. Every small mistake magnified into a crime. Meanwhile, Zoe, protected unconditionally, grew increasingly certain she could manipulate any situation she wanted. The warped sense of entitlement planted the seed for the false drama Zoe would later stage against Morgan. After spending that first night by the river, Morgan knew she couldn't stay there. She needed to find somewhere safer, at least temporarily. With her legs still stiff from the cold night, she made her way across town to Olivia Chen's house. Olivia had been her best friend since 7th grade. The Chen family lived in a large Tudor-style home in Hyde Park, one of Cincinnati's most affluent neighborhoods. Morgan hesitated before ringing the doorbell, suddenly aware of how she must look disheveled, barefoot, clutching a garbage bag of belongings. When Olivia opened the door, her eyes widened in shock. "Morgan, oh my God, what happened to you?" Morgan's composure crumbled. Tears welled up as she tried to explain, her voice breaking. "They kicked me out. My parents, they think I stole money from my dad's wallet, but I didn't. Zoe set me up. She put the money under my pillow." Olivia pulled her inside without hesitation, wrapping her in a tight hug. "Come upstairs quickly. My parents are at a fundraiser. They won't be back for hours." In the safety of Olivia's bedroom, Morgan took a hot shower, the warmth painful against her frozen skin. Olivia lent her clean clothes, warm socks, and a pair of running shoes. "You can stay here tonight," Olivia said firmly. "We'll figure something out tomorrow." For the first time in 24 hours, Morgan felt a flicker of hope. She slept deeply that night, exhausted from the trauma and cold. but safety proved temporary. The next afternoon, Mrs. Chen knocked on Olivia's bedroom door. When she saw Morgan sitting on the bed, her expression shifted from surprise to concern. "Morgan, I didn't know you were here." Olivia stepped forward. "Mom, Morgan needs help. Her parents kicked her out last night." Mrs. Chen's gaze moved between the girls, her brow furrowing. "Kicked out? Why would William and Rebecca do that?" As Morgan explained what had happened, she watched Mrs. Chen's face change. The initial sympathy gave way to something more complicated: caution, perhaps even fear. "Morgan," Mrs. Chen said finally, "you know we care about you. But this situation sounds very serious. Have you considered that there might be legal implications? A minor leaving home could be considered running away." "But I didn't run away," Morgan protested. "They threw me out." "Yes, but—" Mrs. Chen paused, choosing her words carefully. "Your father is a prominent figure in Cincinnati. These kinds of family matters can become complicated. I need to make some calls." She left the room, and Morgan heard her speaking in hushed tones on the phone. Olivia squeezed Morgan's hand reassuringly, but a sense of dread was building in Morgan's stomach. When Mrs. Chen returned, her expression was solemn. "Morgan, you can stay with us for 2 nights, but then we need to find a more appropriate solution. My husband's law firm advises that we could potentially face issues if this becomes a legal matter. We should contact social services tomorrow." "Mom," Olivia exclaimed, "you can't be serious. Morgan has nowhere to go." "Olivia, this isn't simple. There are procedures for situations like this. If Morgan's parents claim she ran away—" "But that's not what happened." "I know, sweetheart, but it's their word against hers." The realization hit Morgan like a physical blow. In the adult world, her truth held no weight against her parents' version of events. Mrs. Chen wasn't being cruel, she was being practical. The Hayes family had connections, influence, and most importantly, they were adults. Morgan was just a teenager with a story no one would believe. For 2 days, Morgan stayed with the Chens, trying to make herself as unobtrusive as possible. She called her Aunt Angela, her mother's younger sister, hoping for support. "Aunt Angela, please, you have to believe me. I didn't take that money." "Morgan, honey," Angela sighed through the phone, "I believe you're upset, but sometimes in families we need to be the bigger person. The best thing is to go home and apologize. Adults can be wrong, but as a child you should give in. That's how things stay peaceful." "But I didn't take the money. I can't confess to something Zoe did." "Life isn't fair, sweetheart. If one apology can keep the family calm, then you should do it. Don't fight your parents." The conversation left Morgan cold. Even Angela, who had always been kind to her, was suggesting she accept blame for something she didn't do, all to maintain the illusion of family harmony. When her 2 days with the Chens were up, Morgan began a cycle of couch surfing. She stayed with different friends from school, never more than a night or 2 at each place. The pattern became depressingly familiar. Initial sympathy followed by growing discomfort, and finally apologetic requests for her to move on. "My parents don't agree. It's not convenient. Just one more night, okay?" On the last night at a friend's house, Morgan overheard her friend's parents arguing in the next room, their whispers slipping through the wall. "If we keep letting that girl stay here, we could get dragged into the Hayes family's mess. William sits on 3 nonprofit boards. He could make things difficult for us." "I know, but where is she supposed to go?" "That's not our problem. Her parents are looking for her. What if they accuse us of harboring her?" Morgan knew then it was time to leave. There was no place that truly welcomed her. In the adult world, connections and reputations mattered more than a teenager's well-being. In the days that followed, Morgan was forced to seek out places no one would imagine as a bed for a 16-year-old girl. The public library became her regular shelter. She would sit in a hidden corner on the 2nd floor, pretending to read until everyone left. When the staff came around to announce closing time, she would act as if she were leaving too, then slip back inside and curl herself into a dark corner near the old bookshelves. Nights in the library weren't as cold as the streets, but the stillness made her heart tighten. She flinched at every small sound: the creak of a door, the footsteps of the cleaning crew. Her sleep came in shallow bursts, always laced with the fear of being discovered. When she couldn't stay at the library, Morgan went to a gas station near school. There, the neon lights stayed bright all night. Rows of hard plastic chairs lined the wall, and the night shift clerks had grown used to her face after seeing her so many times. They didn't ask questions. They just glanced at her and let her sit quietly. Morgan hugged her garbage bag to her chest, resting her head on the cold plastic table, trying to sleep amid the sharp smell of gasoline and the steady hum of the pumps. Once, a truck driver stared at her for a long time, his eyes a mix of pity and suspicion. She shivered, pulled her jacket up to cover her face, pretending she was just waiting for someone to pick her up. Hunger became a habit during those days. Morgan survived on cheap bread bought with the few coins she had saved, sometimes grabbing discarded snacks from convenience stores. Every time she saw a family walk into the gas station laughing, buying hot food, then driving away, her chest ached. She used to have a family too. Unfair as it was, it had still been a roof over her head. Now all of it was gone, leaving her adrift, a 16-year-old girl lost in a vast city. And the more places she passed through, the more she came to realize a cruel truth. She had become a burden in everyone's eyes. Her friends pitied her, but could only help temporarily, while adults always feared trouble. Morgan started to believe that maybe she really was invisible, that no one wanted to keep her, and that hurt more than the cold or the hunger ever could. School had once been the only place where Morgan felt she had any worth, the place where her photographs hung in the hallway, where teachers used to smile and call her the most creative girl in class. But after the night she was thrown out, everything changed so quickly she couldn't even catch her breath. The rumor that she had stolen money from her own father began creeping through every corner of the hallways, spreading like fire through dry grass. Within days, wherever Morgan went, she heard whispers, half scorn, half pity. "That's the Hayes girl. I heard she stole from her dad." A girl's voice drifted as Morgan walked into class. "No wonder she's always so quiet. Guilty conscience, I guess." Another voice chimed in. Morgan tried to ignore it, keeping her head down over her notebook, but each word landed in her ears like tiny knives. Before she had a few close friends besides Olivia, people who used to invite her to lunch or work on group projects together. But after the rumor, those invitations vanished. When she approached them, they shifted their chairs away or pretended to be busy. One time, Morgan set her lunch tray down at a table, and a group of girls silently stood up the scrape of their chairs, loud in the empty space they left behind. She bit her lip, swallowing hard, pretending not to notice. But inside, she felt herself shattering. It wasn't just her classmates. Even the teachers she admired changed. Ms. Reeves, her photography teacher, who had once encouraged Morgan to submit her work to competitions, now looked at her with a distant expression. When Morgan turned in an assignment late because she had slept at the gas station the night before, Ms. Reeves didn't ask why. She just shook her head. "Morgan, you need to be more responsible." Morgan wanted to explain, but exhaustion clogged her throat. Her gym teacher, who had always praised her endurance during runs, now only frowned when Morgan asked to sit out because she was too weak from hunger. "If you don't want to participate, just say so. Don't make excuses." Morgan realized then that in the eyes of the adults, the rumor had become truth. No one asked her for proof because no one cared. The loneliness at school was sharpened by small malicious acts. Tyler Davidson, a tall basketball player who had chatted with Morgan in the cafeteria last year, now deliberately rammed his shoulder into hers as she walked down the hall. "Better watch my wallet," he sneered, his mocking laugh echoing down the corridor. His friends burst into laughter, leaving Morgan frozen, her heart pounding and her face burning. She didn't dare react. She only bent down to pick up her scattered notebooks, her hands trembling. Her silence only made them more delighted. In that moment, Morgan felt she had truly become a pitiful shadow, a cheap amusement for others. Lunchtime was the worst. Morgan had once sat at tables with Olivia or a few other friends eating and talking about assignments. But now even Olivia couldn't always sit with her. Her mother had started to notice and worry about getting involved. Morgan would shuffle into the cafeteria carrying a tray with nothing but a small carton of milk and a packet of crackers, bought with the few coins she had left. The plastic tables buzzed with laughter and chatter, but it all felt closed off to her. She chose a far corner, sitting quietly. Her stomach twisted and growled so hard it felt like it might turn itself inside out, but her mouth didn't want to eat. She just sat there staring at the plates of pizza hamburgers and piles of fries in front of her classmates, the smell filling the room. Morgan used to think school lunches were ordinary. Now they had become a form of torture. One morning, after a particularly rough night spent hiding from security guards at the mall, Morgan gathered all her courage and went to the guidance counselor's office. The small room smelled faintly of coffee and printer paper. Ms. Patel, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, looked up when Morgan knocked softly on the door. "Come in, Morgan. Have a seat." Morgan sat down, her hands trembling around her notebook. She told Ms. Patel everything the night her parents searched her room, Zoe's false tears being thrown out into the cold. She swore over and over that she hadn't taken any money, that something unfair was happening. Ms. Patel listened, nodding occasionally, murmuring, "I see." When Morgan finally stopped, her eyes red and waiting for reassurance, Ms. Patel only sighed. "Morgan, I believe you're going through a lot of difficulties, but without concrete evidence, no one can really do anything. This is essentially a family dispute. My advice is to focus on your studies and try not to let your family issues affect you. This will pass." That answer fell on Morgan like a heavy stone. She wanted to scream, "How can it pass when everyone thinks I'm a thief, when I'm sleeping in a gas station, when I'm starving?" But she just sat there hollow inside, knowing another door had closed. She walked out of the office, her steps heavy, feeling that the adult world was nothing but walls of silence. That afternoon, as Morgan was sitting on a bench near the library, gathering strength to face another night of uncertainty, she heard a familiar voice calling her name. Looking up, she saw her father standing there, his arms crossed, eyes filled with anger and authority. A chill ran down her spine. William stepped closer, his voice clipped and sharp. "You've embarrassed me enough. Come home now. But first, you're going to admit you took the money. You're going to apologize to me, to your mother, to Zoe. Only then will there be peace." Morgan trembled, but still tried to gather the last scraps of strength inside her. "I didn't do it. I can't confess to something I didn't do." William's face flushed red, his fist clenched tight. He leaned down, his words hissing through his teeth. "If you don't listen, I'll call the police. I'll say you stole money and ran away. I have plenty of people who'll testify against you. You want to end up in juvenile detention." Morgan's heart dropped into a pit. She realized that to her father, the truth meant nothing. He didn't want to know whether she was innocent or not. He just wanted her to kneel to admit guilt, to restore the image of a model family in front of neighbors and colleagues. When she looked into his eyes, she saw only coldness, emptiness. He was no longer the father she had once hoped would protect her. He was just someone who wanted to control everything, including her truth. Morgan stepped back, her voice surprisingly steady. "If you want to call the police, go ahead. I won't confess. I didn't steal." She turned and walked away, her feet heavy as if weighed down by stones. Behind her, she heard him shout, "You'll regret this, Morgan. You'll regret it." But this time she didn't stop. That night, Morgan sat in the corner of the gas station, her back against the cold wall, watching headlights flash across the windows as cars pulled in and out. The confrontation with her father had left her shaking inside. His threat to call the police echoed in her mind, making sleep impossible despite her exhaustion. The night attendant Jorge glanced at her occasionally from behind the counter. Unlike the day staff who sometimes asked her to leave, Jorge seemed to understand she had nowhere else to go. Around midnight, he brought her a cup of hot chocolate. "On the house," he said, setting it down beside her. "You look like you could use it." Morgan wrapped her fingers around the warm cup, grateful for the small kindness. "Thank you." "I see you here most nights now," Jorge said, his voice gentle. "Home trouble." Morgan nodded, not trusting herself to speak without crying. "I had a daughter about your age," Jorge continued. "She ran away 3 years ago. Sometimes I wonder if someone showed her kindness on cold nights." He didn't press for details, and Morgan didn't offer any, but the brief connection made her feel slightly less invisible as she sipped the hot chocolate. Around 2 in the morning, a group of rowdy teenagers entered the station, laughing loudly as they grabbed snacks and energy drinks. One of them noticed Morgan in the corner. "Hey, isn't that the Hayes girl, the one who stole from her dad?" Morgan kept her eyes down, pretending not to hear. But the boy approached, leaning close. "What are you doing here, thief, casing the place?" His friends laughed. Morgan remained silent, curling further into herself. "Leave her alone," Jorge called from behind the counter. "Or take your business elsewhere." The teens grumbled but moved away. After they left, Morgan wiped away the tears that had slipped down her cheeks. Even here, the rumors had followed her. The incident at the gas station convinced Morgan she needed to find somewhere safer. The next day after school, she headed to the Cincinnati Public Library, her shoulders hunched against the increasingly cold weather. Inside, she found a secluded corner on the third floor, near the anthropology section that few people visited. As closing time approached, Morgan pretended to leave with the other patrons, then slipped back inside, hiding in the women's restroom until the final security sweep was complete. Heart pounding, she made her way to her chosen spot, where two large armchairs created a small nook partially hidden from view. She had just settled in when she heard a soft voice. "I thought I might find someone here." Morgan froze. An older woman with silver hair and kind eyes stood before her, a library badge identifying her as Ms. Rosario, Acquisitions Department. "Please," Morgan whispered. "I just need somewhere warm for the night, Ms." Rosario studied her for a long moment. "You're the girl who won the photography contest last year. Morgan Hayes, right? I remember your exhibit on homeless youth." Morgan nodded, tension coiling in her stomach. Would the librarian call security? Or worse, her parents? To her surprise, Ms. Rosario sat in the chair opposite her. "I have a daughter who left home when she was 17. That was 15 years ago. I still don't know where she is or if she's safe." She paused. "Are you in trouble, Morgan?" The unexpected compassion broke something inside Morgan. Words tumbled out her sister's accusation. Her father's rage the nights spent in the cold, the whispers at school. Ms. Rosario listened without interruption, her face growing increasingly concerned. When Morgan finished, the librarian was quiet for a moment. Then she stood. "Come with me." She led Morgan to a small room at the back of the library. "This is the staff break room. There's a couch, a microwave, and a bathroom with a shower. The security cameras don't cover this area." She pulled out a key. "This is my spare. Don't let anyone see you coming or going. Be out by 5:30 in the morning. The early shift starts at 6. Morgan stared at the key in disbelief. "Why are you helping me?" "Because 15 years ago I wish someone had helped my daughter." Ms. Rosario squeezed Morgan's shoulder. "But Morgan, this is temporary. We need to find you proper help." For the next few nights, the library break room became Morgan's sanctuary. She slept on the small couch washed in the staff shower, and even managed to microwave occasional meals from the dollar store. Each morning, she slipped out before anyone arrived, feeling momentarily human again. But her daytime hours remained a nightmare. The rumors at school had evolved from whispers to open hostility. She walked through hallways where students openly pointed and laughed. Teachers who once praised her creativity now eyed her with suspicion, as if expecting her to steal classroom supplies. One morning, Morgan arrived at her locker to find "thief" written across it in black marker. Her hands shook as she tried to wipe it off, but the ink had already dried, leaving a ghost of the word visible even after her efforts. Around her, students snickered behind their hands. "Need some money for cleaning supplies," Tyler Davidson called out loud enough for everyone to hear. His basketball teammates erupted in laughter. Morgan kept her head down, fumbling with her combination lock, willing herself not to cry. She had almost managed to open the locker when someone knocked her books from her hands, scattering them across the floor. "Oops, sorry," a girl said insincerely. "Didn't see you there." Morgan knelt to gather her things, her vision blurring with unshed tears. A hand appeared, helping collect her books. She looked up to find Olivia, her friend's face tight with concern. "This has to stop," Olivia whispered. "It's cruel." "Your mom still won't let you talk to me," Morgan reminded her. "I don't care. This isn't right." They walked to class together, Olivia's presence temporarily shielding Morgan from the worst of the taunts. But at lunch, Olivia was called to a student council meeting, leaving Morgan to face the cafeteria alone. She sat at her usual isolated table, nibbling on a granola bar Ms. Rosario had given her. The noise of the cafeteria seemed to swell around her, teenagers laughing and shouting, living normal lives that now seemed so far removed from her reality. "Is this seat taken?" Morgan looked up startled to find her photography teacher, Ms. Reeves, standing by her table with a lunch tray. Without waiting for an answer, the teacher sat down. "I saw your latest submission," Ms. Reeves said casually, as if they regularly ate lunch together. "The series on urban landscapes at dawn. It's quite powerful." Morgan stared at her, confused by the sudden attention. "Thank you," she managed. "You have a gift for capturing emotion through light, Morgan. Not many students have that innate ability." The unexpected praise made Morgan's throat tighten. She had submitted those photos days ago, expecting them to be graded without comment like all her recent work. "I've been wondering," Ms. Reeves continued, her voice lower now, "if everything is all right with you. You seem different lately, tired, withdrawn." For a moment, Morgan considered telling the truth, but the memory of her guidance counselor's dismissive response held her back. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "Just busy." Ms. Reeves nodded clearly, not believing her, but not pushing further. "My classroom is open during lunch periods if you ever need a quiet place to work. Or just to sit." She stood to leave, then added, "Your talent hasn't gone unnoticed, Morgan. Remember that." The small interaction left Morgan feeling strangely unsettled. It was the first time in weeks that a teacher had shown genuine concern rather than suspicion. But she had learned the hard way not to trust adult sympathy too quickly. That afternoon, as Morgan made her way through the crowded hallway between classes, a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Morgan!" She turned to find Zoe standing there, surrounded by her usual group of friends. Her sister looked perfect as always, designer clothes, carefully styled hair, the picture of a successful, well-adjusted teenager. So different from Morgan's worn jeans and unwashed hoodie. "What do you want?" Morgan asked, instantly on guard. Zoe glanced at her friends. "Give us a minute," she said, and they moved away, watching curiously from a distance. When they were alone, Zoe's expression changed. The friendly smile disappeared, replaced by something colder. "You're still coming to school. I'm surprised." "Where else would I go?" Morgan replied. "I still have a right to an education." Zoe's lips curled slightly. "But it must be so hard with everyone knowing what you did." Morgan felt anger flare in her chest. "I didn't do anything. You know that better than anyone." Zoe stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Yes, I put the money under your pillow. I wanted you gone, and you're gone. Easier than I thought." The admission, so casually delivered, knocked the breath from Morgan's lungs. Even though she had known the truth all along, hearing Zoe confess with such callousness made her dizzy with rage and pain. "Why?" Morgan managed to ask, her voice barely audible. "Why?" Zoe's eyes flashed. "Because you've always been the special one. Morgan the artist, Morgan the sensitive soul. No one ever sees me." "That's not true. Mom and Dad always favored you. At home, maybe, but everywhere else it's always about you. Your stupid photos, your awards, the way teachers look at you like you're some kind of prodigy." Zoe's voice shook slightly. "Do you know what it's like to always be compared to your sister? Why can't you be creative like Morgan? Where's your artistic side?" "I'm so sick of it." Morgan stared at her sister, truly seeing her for the first time. The jealousy, the insecurity, the desperate need for recognition. It didn't excuse what Zoe had done, but it made her human rather than simply monstrous. "You could tell them the truth," Morgan said quietly. "Help me come home." Zoe's expression hardened again. "And lose everything I've gained. Not a chance. And listen, if you ever open your mouth about this, I'll make it worse. I'll say you hit me. I'll cry. I'll create proof. You'll be sent straight to a reform camp." She leaned closer. "Everyone will believe me. No one believes a stray failure like you." With that, Zoe turned and walked back to her friends, instantly transforming back into the perfect popular girl with the perfect smile. Morgan stood frozen, her whole body cold, as if she'd been plunged into an icy lake. She had hoped somehow that confronting Zoe might lead to reconciliation. Instead, she discovered that her sister wasn't just jealous, she was dangerous. That evening, Morgan returned to the library more shaken than ever. Ms. Rosario noticed her distress and brought her a sandwich from the cafe downstairs. "Bad day?" she asked gently. Morgan nodded, unable to speak through the lump in her throat. Sometimes the people who should love us the most are the ones who hurt us the worst, Ms. Rosario said. When my daughter left, it was after a fight with her father. He said things no parent should ever say to a child. She paused, her eyes distant with memory. I didn't defend her strongly enough. That's something I'll regret forever. Morgan picked at the sandwich, her appetite gone. My sister confessed today. She admitted she set me up, and she threatened to make things worse if I tell anyone. Ms. Rosario's eyes widened. Morgan, that's serious. We need to report this. To who my guidance counselor already dismissed me. My aunt told me to just apologize and move on. No one believes me. I believe you, Ms. Rosario said firmly, and we'll find someone else who will too. But the next morning, everything fell apart. Morgan arrived at the library before school to shower and change, only to find the break room door locked with a different key. A security guard stood nearby, eyeing her suspiciously. Can I help you? He asked, stepping forward. I'm just looking for Ms. Rosario, Morgan said, her heart sinking. Ms. Rosario has been reassigned to the downtown branch, the guard replied. And I've been instructed to inform you that sleeping in the library is prohibited. If you're found on the premises after hours again, we'll have to contact the authorities. Morgan backed away, panic rising in her throat. Her sanctuary was gone, and with it, her one adult ally. She spent that day at school in a daze, unable to focus on anything except the looming question of where she would sleep that night. The temperature had dropped further, with forecasts predicting the first frost of the season. The gas station was no longer safe after the incident with the teenagers. The park was too exposed. After school, Morgan wandered aimlessly, eventually finding herself back at Smale Riverfront Park, where she had spent her first homeless night. The sky was already darkening the air, crisp with approaching winter. Back again, photographer girl. Morgan turned to find Henry, the homeless veteran, watching her from a bench. She hadn't seen him since that first night. I lost my place at the library, she admitted. I don't know where to go. Henry studied her, noticing her increasing thinness, the dark circles under her eyes. The encampment under the bridge might have space. It's not much, but it's safer than being alone. He led her to a hidden area beneath one of Cincinnati's many bridges, where a small community of homeless people had established a makeshift camp. Tents and tarps created private spaces, while shared fire barrels provided warmth. Morgan recognized several faces from her photography project. Gloria, the former nurse she had interviewed months ago, approached them. Henry, who's this? The photographer girl. She's in a bad way. Gloria's eyes softened with recognition. I remember you. You took my picture for your school project. She looked Morgan up and down. You're homeless now, too. Morgan nodded, shame and exhaustion overwhelming her. My family kicked me out. No one will help. Gloria sighed. That's how it goes, honey. One day you're somebody, the next you're invisible. She gestured toward a small fire. Come warm up. We can make space for you tonight. That night, Morgan slept in a corner of Gloria's tent, wrapped in borrowed blankets that smelled of campfire smoke. Around her, the other homeless residents went about their evening routines, sharing meager meals, telling stories, watching out for each other. It struck Morgan that here, among society's most marginalized people, she had found more compassion than in her own home. The next few days established a new rhythm to Morgan's life. She would wake before dawn, wash as best she could at a public restroom, then head to school. After classes, she would take whatever food she could find, sometimes from sympathetic cafeteria workers who slipped her extra portions, sometimes from dumpsters behind restaurants, back to the encampment to share. Gloria taught her the survival skills no teenager should need, to know how to layer clothing for maximum warmth, how to recognize safe and unsafe situations on the street, which public buildings had the cleanest bathrooms, which soup kitchens served meals on which days. The most dangerous thing isn't the cold or the hunger, Gloria told her one evening as they huddled by the fire. It's becoming invisible. Once people stop seeing you as human, that's when the real danger starts. Morgan understood what she meant. Already she had noticed how differently people looked at her now that she clearly lived on the streets. Some averted their eyes, uncomfortable with the reality she represented. Others stared with a mixture of pity and disgust. A few looked predatory, sensing vulnerability they could exploit. She kept her camera with her, always tucked safely in her backpack. It was her most valuable possession, not just financially, but emotionally. Through her lens, she could still create beauty, still have a voice when the world wanted her to be silent. One afternoon, Morgan was photographing the changing leaves along the riverfront when she spotted a familiar figure on a bench, Ms. Rosario. She hesitated, then approached. "Ms. Rosario." The librarian looked up, her face lighting with relief. "Morgan, I've been looking for you everywhere." "Are you all right? Where are you staying?" "I'm okay," Morgan said, the lie automatic. "I found a place with some people under the bridge." Ms. Rosario's face fell. "Oh, Morgan, that's no place for a 16-year-old girl." "It's better than nowhere." "I'm so sorry about the library. The manager found out I was letting you stay. He threatened to fire me if I continued." Ms. Rosario reached into her bag. "I brought you something." She handed Morgan a small package wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a prepaid phone. "It's not much, but it has my number programmed in. Call me if you need anything day or night." Morgan clutched the phone, overwhelmed by the gesture. "Thank you. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, just stay safe." Ms. Rosario squeezed her hand. "And Morgan, I'm still looking for help for you. Don't give up hope." The phone became Morgan's lifeline over the next week. She used it sparingly, knowing the minutes were limited. But just having a way to connect with the outside world made her feel less alone. She continued attending school despite the increasing hostility. Her determination to maintain some normalcy in her life became an act of defiance against her family, against the rumors, against the system that had failed her. But as November deepened, the weather grew increasingly harsh. The encampment under the bridge provided some shelter from wind and rain, but nothing could fully protect against the biting cold that seeped into bones and made sleep nearly impossible. One night, a group of drunk college students stumbled upon the encampment. What started as jeering quickly escalated to threats. They began kicking over the carefully arranged possessions, laughing as people scrambled to protect what little they had. One of them spotted Morgan and recognized her. "Hey, it's the Hayes girl, the thief." He lunged toward her, grabbing for her backpack, where her camera was stored. Morgan fought back, clinging desperately to the strap. "Let go, please!" The struggle drew the attention of the other students who surrounded them, cheering on their friend. Morgan felt the strap beginning to slip from her grasp. Suddenly, Henry appeared, placing himself between Morgan and her attacker. "That's enough," he said, his voice carrying the authority of his military past. "Leave her alone." The student sneered. "What are you going to do about it, old man?" Henry didn't respond with words. He simply stood taller, his presence commanding respect even in his tattered clothes. The student hesitated, then backed away, muttering insults. When they had gone, Morgan sank to the ground, shaking uncontrollably. Her backpack was safe, but the encounter left her terrified. "They knew who I was," she whispered. "What if they tell people I'm here? What if my father finds out?" Gloria wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "We'll move you to a different spot tomorrow, somewhere safer." But Morgan knew nowhere was truly safe. As long as she was on the streets, she was vulnerable to the elements, to predators, to the cruelty of strangers. That night, as freezing rain pattered against the tarp above her, Morgan made a decision. She couldn't continue like this indefinitely. Sooner or later, exposure or hunger or violence would catch up with her. She needed to find a more permanent solution. The next day after school, Morgan used the prepaid phone to call Ms. Rosario. "Can we meet? I need advice." They agreed to meet at a small cafe near the downtown library. Morgan arrived early, ordering the cheapest item on the menu, a cup of hot tea to justify taking up table space in the warm building. When Ms. Rosario joined her, the librarian ordered a sandwich and insisted Morgan share it. "You've lost weight," she observed worriedly. "Are you eating at all?" "When I can," Morgan admitted. "But that's what I wanted to talk about. I can't keep living like this. It's getting too cold, and after what happened last night." She described the encounter with the college students, watching Ms. Rosario's face grow increasingly concerned. "Morgan, this is exactly what I've been worried about. You're not safe out there." "I know, but what options do I have? My parents won't take me back unless I admit to something I didn't do." The shelters won't take unaccompanied minors without parental permission. Foster care means leaving my school, my few remaining friends starting over somewhere new. Ms. Rosario was quiet for a moment. There might be another option. My mother lives alone in a house in Mount Auburn. She has plenty of space and has been asking me for years to find someone to stay with her for company. She hesitated. It wouldn't be a perfect solution, but it would be warm and safe while we figure something more permanent out. Hope flickered in Morgan's chest for the first time in weeks. Do you think she would let me stay? I think she would welcome the company. Let me call her. Ms. Rosario stepped outside to make the call, leaving Morgan to finish the sandwich. When she returned, her expression was cautiously optimistic. She wants to meet you first, but she's open to the idea. She's a retired nurse, very independent despite her age. She'd want you to help around the house in exchange for room and board. I'd do anything, Morgan said immediately. When can we meet her? She suggested dinner tonight if you're available. That evening, Morgan waited anxiously outside Gloria's tent, having used the public pool showers to make herself as presentable as possible. She had brushed her hair and borrowed a clean sweater from one of the younger women at the encampment. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked the time on her prepaid phone. Ms. Rosario arrived precisely on schedule, driving an older model sedan. Ready? She asked as Morgan climbed into the passenger seat. What if she doesn't like me? Morgan couldn't help asking. My mother is a good judge of character. Just be yourself. They drove through Cincinnati's historic Mount Auburn neighborhood, where elegant Victorian homes lined the streets. Ms. Rosario pulled up in front of a well-maintained red brick house with white trim and a small front porch. Here we are, she said, turning off the engine. Don't be nervous. Mother can sense fear, she added with a small smile. Morgan followed Ms. Rosario up the front steps, her heart pounding. The door opened before they could knock, revealing a slender woman with silver hair pulled back in a neat bun. Despite her age, Morgan guessed she must be in her late 70s. She stood straight, her blue eyes sharp and alert. You must be Morgan, the woman said, her voice warm but assessing. I'm Eleanor Rosario. Come in out of the cold. The house was immaculate inside, filled with antique furniture and the scent of something delicious cooking. Morgan stood awkwardly in the entryway, suddenly very aware of her worn shoes and borrowed clothes. Maria has told me about your situation, Eleanor said, leading them into a dining room where the table was already set for 3. A terrible shame how some parents fail their children. Morgan glanced at Ms. Rosario Maria, surprised by the direct acknowledgement of her circumstances. Most adults she had encountered preferred to dance around the unpleasant reality. Thank you for having me for dinner, Mrs. Rosario, she said politely. Eleanor, please. Mrs. Rosario makes me sound like my mother-in-law. God rest her soul. Eleanor gestured toward the table. Sit down. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks. Dinner was simple but nourishing homemade soup, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Throughout the meal, Eleanor asked Morgan questions about her schooling, her photography, her plans for the future. The conversation flowed naturally, without the awkwardness Morgan had feared. When they had finished eating, Eleanor fixed Morgan with a direct gaze. Maria tells me you need a place to stay. Yes, ma'am, Morgan admitted. Just temporarily until I can figure something else out. And what would you be willing to do in exchange for room and board? Anything, Morgan said earnestly. I can clean, cook, run errands, whatever you need. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. I don't need much help, truth be told. I've managed on my own since my husband passed 8 years ago. But the house is too quiet sometimes. She paused. I have a few conditions. You continue school, you maintain good grades, you help with household chores, and you tell me the truth always. Can you agree to those terms? Yes, Morgan whispered, hardly daring to believe this might be real. Yes, I can. Then the guest room is yours for as long as you need it. Later that night, after Ms. Rosario had helped Morgan retrieve her few belongings from the encampment and say goodbye to Gloria and Henry, Morgan found herself standing in a small but comfortable bedroom. It had a real bed with clean sheets, a desk, a closet, even a bookshelf filled with old novels. Bathrooms across the hall, Eleanor said, showing her around. Towels in the linen closet. Breakfast is at 7. I'm an early riser. Thank you, Morgan said, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. I don't know how to thank you enough. No need for thanks. Just keep your word. Eleanor paused at the door. And Morgan, whatever happened with your family, it wasn't your fault. Remember that. After Eleanor left, Morgan sat on the edge of the bed, running her hands over the soft quilt. For the first time in weeks, she would sleep without fear of the cold of discovery of violence. The relief was so intense it brought tears to her eyes. She unpacked her few possessions, arranging her camera and notebooks on the desk. Then she took the longest, hottest shower she could remember, scrubbing away the grime of the streets, watching it spiral down the drain. Wrapped in a borrowed bathrobe, hair still damp, Morgan returned to the bedroom and noticed something on the pillow that hadn't been there before: a small journal with a note attached. Everyone needs a place to keep their thoughts safe. Sleep well. E. Morgan opened the journal, its pages crisp and blank, waiting for her story. She found a pen in the desk drawer and began to write, starting with the night she was thrown out of her home. The words flowed easily, filling page after page with her experiences. The cold nights, the hunger, the cruelty, but also the unexpected kindnesses from strangers, like Henry Gloria, and now Eleanor. Writing released something inside her, a pressure that had been building since that first terrible night. By the time she finished, exhaustion overtook her. She placed the journal in the drawer, turned off the light, and slipped between clean sheets. For the first time in nearly a month, Morgan slept without nightmares, without waking at every sound, without curling into herself for warmth. She slept the deep, healing sleep of someone who has finally found sanctuary. The next morning, Morgan woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day rushed back: the dinner, Eleanor's offer, the clean bed, the journal. She dressed quickly in her cleanest remaining clothes and made her way downstairs, following the scent of coffee and toast. Eleanor was already in the kitchen, reading a newspaper at the table. "Good morning," Morgan said tentatively. Eleanor looked up. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in weeks." "Good. There's toast eggs in the fridge if you want them. Coffee's fresh." Eleanor returned to her newspaper. "We'll need to get you some proper clothes today, and school supplies." "I can't ask you to buy me things," Morgan protested. "You're not asking. I'm offering." Eleanor folded the newspaper. "Consider it an investment in your future." After breakfast, Eleanor drove Morgan to school. As they pulled up to the entrance, Morgan hesitated. "What will I tell people about where I'm staying?" "The truth if anyone asks. You're staying with a family friend while sorting out some personal matters." Eleanor studied her carefully. "Are you embarrassed to be associated with an old woman?" "No, not at all. Morgan struggled to articulate her fear. "I don't want my father to find out where I am. Not yet." Understanding dawned in Eleanor's eyes. "Ah, well, we'll be discreet then. I'll pick you up at 3:30. As Morgan walked into school, she felt different. Not just because she was clean and rested, but because she carried something she had lost: hope. The taunts and whispers still followed her through the hallways, but they seemed to matter less now. In photography class, Ms. Reeves noticed the change immediately. "You look better today," she commented, as Morgan worked on her latest assignment. "I found a place to stay," Morgan admitted quietly, "with Ms. Rosario's mother." Relief washed over Ms. Reeves's face. "I'm glad to hear that. I've been worried about you." "You knew?" Morgan asked, surprised. "That something was very wrong, yes. That you were homeless, I suspected, but wasn't certain until now." Ms. Reeves lowered her voice. "Not all teachers are oblivious, Morgan. Some of us do care." The knowledge that someone at school had noticed, had cared, warmed Morgan unexpectedly. For weeks, she had felt completely invisible within the school system, just another troubled teen easily overlooked. At lunch, Morgan sat in her usual isolated spot, but the experience felt different. With a real breakfast in her stomach and the promise of dinner later, the gnawing hunger that had become her constant companion was absent. She could focus on her schoolwork, on planning her next photography project, on the future. Olivia found her there, sliding into the seat across from her with visible relief. "You look better. Did something change?" Morgan hesitated, then decided to trust her oldest friend. I found a place to stay, with a friend's grandmother. Thank God, Olivia breathed. I've been so worried. My mom's been impossible. She forbade me from helping you, said it could affect Dad's business relationship with your father. It's okay, Morgan assured her, though the reminder of her father's influence stung. I'm safe now. Safe enough to come to my birthday party next weekend. Mom's out of town and Dad doesn't care who I invite. The invitation, so normal, so teenage, brought tears to Morgan's eyes. I'd love to. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes and homework. When the final bell rang, Morgan made her way to the front entrance, half expecting Eleanor to have forgotten her promise. But there she was, parked exactly where she had dropped Morgan off that morning. As Morgan approached the car, a familiar voice called her name. She turned to see Zoe standing nearby, surrounded by friends, but clearly focused on Morgan. New chauffeur service? Zoe asked, her tone light, but her eyes cold. Didn't know homeless shelters offered rides now? Morgan felt a flash of the old fear, the instinct to duck her head and hurry away. But something had changed in her. Maybe it was the night of proper sleep, or Eleanor's quiet confidence, or simply having reached her limit of enduring Zoe's cruelty. Not everyone abandons family when it's inconvenient, Morgan replied, her voice steady. Some people still believe in helping others. Zoe's eyes widened slightly at the unexpected response. Before she could reply, Morgan turned away and got into Eleanor's car. Friend of yours? Eleanor asked as they pulled away from the curb. My sister, Morgan said quietly. Eleanor's eyebrows rose. Interesting family dynamics you have there. You have no idea. They spent the afternoon shopping at a second-hand store where Eleanor insisted on buying Morgan enough clothes to fill the small closet in the guest room. They also purchased school supplies, toiletries, and a warm winter coat. You don't have to do all this, Morgan protested as the items piled up at the register. I know I don't have to, Eleanor replied simply. I want to. That evening, as they prepared dinner together, Eleanor asked Morgan about her photography. Maria mentioned you won some awards. What do you like to photograph? Morgan hesitated, then pulled out her camera. People mostly, especially those society tends to ignore. She showed Eleanor her portfolio, including the series on homelessness that had won the statewide competition. Eleanor studied the images with a critical eye. These are remarkable, especially for someone your age. You see, people really see them. That's what I try to do, Morgan admitted. Make the invisible visible. A worthy goal. Eleanor handed back the camera. You should continue this work. Later, as Morgan updated her journal before bed, she reflected on the day's events. For the first time in weeks, she had experienced something close to normalcy. School shopping, dinner at a real table. The contrast with her recent life on the streets was jarring. But beneath the gratitude for Eleanor's kindness lay a deeper pain. These simple comforts, these basic needs being met, they should have been provided by her family, not by a stranger. The wound of her parents' betrayal still festered, unhealed by her improved circumstances. Morgan closed the journal and turned off the light, staring into the darkness of the unfamiliar room. She was safe for now, but the question remained. How long could this temporary sanctuary last? And what would happen when her father discovered where she was hiding? November faded into December, bringing shorter days and bitter cold to Cincinnati. In the warmth of Eleanor's home, Morgan established a new routine. Each morning she would wake early, help prepare breakfast, then ride to school with Eleanor. Afternoons were spent on homework and household chores. Evenings brought shared dinners and conversations that gradually deepened as trust grew between them. Morgan's physical appearance began to change, as regular meals and proper sleep erased the hollow-cheeked gauntness of her homeless weeks. Her grades improved as she could once again focus on schoolwork rather than basic survival. Even the worst of the bullying at school diminished somewhat, though whispers and occasional taunts still followed her through the hallways. On a snowy Sunday afternoon, Morgan sat at the kitchen table editing photographs, while Eleanor prepared a pot roast for dinner. The rich aroma filled the house, making Morgan's stomach growl appreciatively. When did you first get interested in photography? Eleanor asked, peeling carrots at the sink. Morgan looked up from her laptop. I was 12. My father bought me a basic digital camera for Christmas, one of the few gifts he ever chose himself. She smiled at the memory. I spent that entire winter break taking pictures of everything. Most were terrible, but I was hooked. And now you focus on social issues, Eleanor observed. Homeless communities, urban decay, not typical teenage subject matter. I want my photographs to matter, Morgan explained, to make visible what people choose not to see. An admirable goal. Eleanor added the carrots to the roasting pan. Though perhaps somewhat personal now. Morgan nodded, understanding the gentle probe. She had been reluctant to discuss her family situation in detail. But after nearly a month living with Eleanor, the walls she had built were beginning to crumble. I never understood why my father favored Zoe so much, she said quietly. No matter what I accomplished, it was never enough. Eleanor dried her hands on a dish towel and joined Morgan at the table. Sometimes parents see themselves in one child and their own failures in another. It rarely has anything to do with the children themselves. What do you mean? Your father is a successful businessman, yes, very practical, numbers-oriented. Morgan nodded. And you're creative, artistic, like your grandmother, perhaps. Morgan looked up startled. How did you know that my father's mother was a painter? He never talks about her, but I found some of her work in the attic once. Just an educated guess, Eleanor said with a small smile. People often reject in others what they fear in themselves. Your father may have spent his life running from the very qualities he sees in you. The insight resonated deeply with Morgan. She had never considered that her father's coldness might stem from his own insecurities rather than her inadequacies. Their conversation was interrupted by the doorbell. Eleanor rose to answer it, returning moments later with a concerned expression. Morgan Maria is here. She has news. Ms. Rosario entered the kitchen, snowflakes melting on her coat. Her face was grave. Morgan, I need to tell you something important. Your father came to the library yesterday asking questions about you. Morgan's heart lurched. What kind of questions? He wanted to know if I had seen you, if I knew where you were staying. He mentioned filing a missing persons report. But I'm not missing, Morgan protested. He threw me out. I know, dear. I didn't tell him anything, of course, but I thought you should be prepared. If he's filed a report, the police might get involved. Morgan looked to Eleanor in panic. What do we do? I can't go back there. We stay calm, Eleanor said firmly. Maria, do you know if he's actually filed a report? Not yet, according to my contact at the police department, but he's making noise about it. Eleanor nodded, her expression thoughtful. Then we have time to prepare. Morgan, perhaps it's time to tell us exactly what happened the night you left home. With Ms. Rosario and Eleanor listening intently, Morgan recounted the events of that October evening. Zoe's accusation, the discovery of the money under her pillow, her parents' refusal to believe her innocence, and finally being thrown out into the cold with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes. And later at school, Zoe admitted to me that she planted the money, Morgan finished. She wanted me gone, and it worked perfectly. Ms. Rosario's face had darkened as Morgan spoke. This is absolutely unacceptable. They abandoned a minor. That's neglect, possibly abuse. It's certainly cause for investigation, Eleanor agreed. But William Hayes is a powerful man in this city. We need more than Morgan's word against her families. What about Zoe's confession at school? Ms. Rosario suggested. Morgan shook her head. It was just between us. No witnesses. They sat in silence, considering options. Finally, Eleanor spoke. Morgan, when is your grandmother's birthday dinner? Morgan blinked at the apparent non sequitur. My grandmother. You mean my father's mother next weekend, I think. They always have a formal dinner at her house. Why? Just a thought forming, Eleanor said cryptically. For now, let's finish making dinner and discuss this further. That night, Morgan struggled to sleep, anxiety churning in her stomach. If her father filed a missing persons report, would the police force her to return home? Would they believe her side of the story? Zoe's threat echoed in her mind. Everyone will believe me. No one believes a stray failure like you. The next morning, Eleanor announced she had errands to run and would drop Morgan at school early. As they drove through the quiet streets, Eleanor spoke carefully. I've been thinking about your situation, Morgan. The immediate problems is your father's attempt to regain control through official channels. What can we do? We need leverage, something that would make your parents think twice about pursuing this further. Eleanor glanced at Morgan. You mentioned your sister confessed to you. Would she ever admit it to someone else? Someone she thought wouldn't tell? Morgan considered this. Maybe. Zoe loves to brag. That's why she told me in the first place, to show how clever she was. But she'd only talk if she felt completely safe. Eleanor nodded. I thought as much. That's why I asked about your grandmother's birthday dinner. Family gatherings can loosen tongues, especially among the young. But I won't be there, Morgan pointed out. No, Eleanor agreed. But I'm developing a plan. We'll talk more tonight. Throughout the school day, Morgan's mind kept returning to Eleanor's cryptic comments. What kind of plan could possibly protect her from her father's influence? At lunch, her thoughts were interrupted by Olivia sliding into the seat opposite her. Have you heard? Olivia asked, her voice low. Heard what? Your dad came to school this morning. He was in with the principal for almost an hour. Morgan's stomach dropped. What did they talk about? No one knows exactly, but the office aide overheard something about family counseling and reintegration. Olivia squeezed Morgan's hand. I think he's trying to force you to come home. The news confirmed Morgan's worst fears. Her father was mobilizing his considerable resources to regain control of the narrative and of her. When Eleanor picked her up after school, Morgan immediately shared what she had learned. As expected, Eleanor said calmly, he's establishing his version of events, the concerned father seeking reconciliation with his troubled daughter. What do? We counter with the truth. Eleanor's eyes gleamed with determination. But first, we gather evidence. That evening, Eleanor explained her plan. It was both simple and audacious. She would attend the birthday dinner for Morgan's grandmother, posing as a friend from the neighborhood association. Once there, she would record any incriminating conversations, particularly with Zoe. You can't just crash my grandmother's birthday, Morgan protested. Security would never let you in. You underestimate the social capital of an elderly white woman with proper diction, Eleanor replied with a dry smile. Besides, I won't be crashing. I'll be invited. How? Your grandmother, what's her name? Margaret Hayes, everyone calls her Maggie. And she lives in Amberley Village, correct, in one of those large Tudor-style homes. Morgan nodded, surprised. How did you know? Cincinnati is a smaller city than people realize, especially in certain circles. Maggie Hayes has been on the board of the Cincinnati Arts Council for decades. I served with her on a committee years ago. Morgan stared in disbelief. You know my grandmother? Not well, but enough to send a note expressing interest in attending her birthday celebration as an old acquaintance. Women of our generation understand social obligations. The audacity of the plan both terrified and impressed Morgan. But what if they recognize you're there to help me? They won't. To them, I'll just be another elderly socialite. Eleanor's eyes twinkled. The invisibility of old women can be a powerful tool when used correctly. Over the next few days, Eleanor refined her plan. She sent a tasteful card to Maggie Hayes, received a polite invitation in return, and prepared a small recording device that could be discreetly operated. Remember, she cautioned Morgan, this is just gathering information. We may not get anything useful, but we need to try. The night of the dinner, Eleanor dressed carefully in an elegant navy blue dress, pearl earrings, and a vintage brooch. She looked every inch the respectable society matron. Be careful, Morgan said anxiously as Eleanor prepared to leave. My father can be intimidating. I raised 3 children and managed a hospital ward for 40 years, Eleanor replied. Intimidation is a game 2 can play. Morgan spent that evening pacing the house, checking her phone every few minutes for updates. Ms. Rosario came to keep her company, bringing Chinese takeout and attempting to distract her with conversation about photography. What will happen if this doesn't work? Morgan asked, pushing rice around her plate. If Eleanor can't get Zoe to confess, then we try something else, Ms. Rosario said firmly. We don't give up. It was nearly 11 when they heard Eleanor's car in the driveway. Morgan rushed to the door, Ms. Rosario right behind her. Eleanor entered with a triumphant smile. Mission accomplished. She placed her purse on the table and removed a small digital recorder. I believe I have what we need. They gathered in the living room as Eleanor played the recording. At first, there were just the ambient sounds of the party, clinking glasses, polite conversation, background music. Then a younger voice became distinct. Zoe talking to someone. So boring. These old people parties are the worst. A male voice responded, a cousin Morgan guessed. At least Morgan isn't here to show you up with her artistic talk. Zoe's laugh was sharp. True. That's one good thing about her being gone. Where is she anyway? Aunt Rebecca was super vague when Mom asked. A pause. Then Zoe's voice lower now. Can you keep a secret, like seriously keep it? Yeah, of course. I got rid of her. Zoe's voice held unmistakable pride. Took some money from Dad's wallet, hid it under her pillow, then pretended I saw her steal it. Mom and Dad totally bought it. They threw her out that same night. Holy shit, Zoe, that's cold. Even for you. She deserved it. Always the special one, always so perfect with her stupid photos and her awards. Now everyone thinks she's just a thief and a runaway. But where is she now, living on the streets? Who cares? Not my problem anymore. The recording continued, capturing more of Zoe's callous remarks, including her intention to maintain the lie indefinitely. If she ever tries to come back, I'll just make up something worse. Say she hit me or stole more stuff. Mom and Dad will always believe me over her. When the recording ended, the room was silent. Morgan felt strangely hollow, hearing her sister's cruelty laid bare in her own words. I knew she hated me, she whispered. But hearing it like this… Ms. Rosario squeezed her shoulder. This is powerful evidence, Morgan. It completely corroborates your story. But will it be enough? Morgan asked. Against my father's influence? Perhaps not on its own, Eleanor acknowledged. But I have more news. Your grandmother was quite interested when I mentioned my connection to the library. It seems she's been concerned about your disappearance, but hasn't been given straight answers by your parents. Grandma Maggie was asking about me. Morgan was surprised. Although they weren't close, her grandmother had always been kind to her. More than asking, she cornered me when she realized I might have information. I was selective in what I shared, but I did mention you were safe with a respectable family. She seemed relieved. What does this mean for our plan? It means we may have an ally inside your family, Eleanor explained. Someone with authority even your father respects. They developed a strategy that night. The next morning, Eleanor would contact Maggie Hayes, sharing the recording and arranging a meeting. Meanwhile, Ms. Rosario would speak with a lawyer friend about Morgan's legal options. What about school tomorrow? Morgan asked. If my father talked to the principal, I'll drive you and pick you up as usual, Eleanor said. If anyone official asks questions, say only that you're staying with family friends and refer them to me. Morgan slept fitfully that night, dreams filled with her sister's voice, her father's anger, and the cold concrete of that first night on the streets. She woke early, anxiety churning in her stomach. Eleanor was already in the kitchen making phone calls. She covered the receiver with her hand when Morgan entered. Maggie agreed to meet us today at 2. She's very disturbed by what I told her. School that day was a blur. Morgan moved through her classes mechanically, jumping at every announcement over the intercom, half expecting to be called to the principal's office at any moment. At lunch, Olivia reported new rumors. Your dad was back this morning. He and your mom both. They were talking to the guidance counselors. About me. I think so. Lisa from student council overheard them using terms like family reconciliation and teenage rebellion. Morgan's hands trembled slightly. They're spinning a story where I'm the troubled teen who ran away, and they're the concerned parents trying to help. Exactly, Olivia agreed. Classic manipulation. By the time Eleanor picked her up, Morgan was a bundle of nerves. What if this doesn't work? What if Grandma Maggie doesn't believe us? One step at a time, Eleanor soothed. She agreed to meet. That's already something. They drove to an upscale cafe in Hyde Park, far from both Morgan's school and her parents' neighborhood. Maggie Hayes was already seated at a corner table when they arrived, elegant in a wool coat and silk scarf, her silver hair perfectly styled. She looked up as they approached, her eyes widening at the sight of Morgan. My God, child, you look so thin. Morgan hesitated, then allowed her grandmother to pull her into a tight hug. I'm okay, Grandma. Really. Sit, both of you, Maggie commanded. Eleanor has told me disturbing things. I need to hear your side. Over tea and untouched pastries, Morgan recounted her story, the false accusation being thrown out the weeks of homelessness, and finally finding sanctuary with Eleanor. Maggie listened intently, her expression growing increasingly troubled. When Morgan finished, Eleanor produced the recording from the birthday party. Maggie's face hardened as she listened to her younger granddaughter's callous confession. "That child," she murmured when it ended. "What has happened to her and William and Rebecca? How could they do this?" "Will you help us?" Morgan asked quietly. "Dad is trying to force me to come home. He's been to my school talking to the principal, making it sound like I'm some rebellious runaway." Maggie reached across the table and took Morgan's hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Of course I'll help you. What William has done is unconscionable. And to think I didn't realize what was happening in my own family." "What can you do?" Eleanor asked. "More than William realizes," Maggie replied with steel in her voice. "My son seems to have forgotten who still controls the family trust and who owns the majority share in his company." Morgan stared at her grandmother in surprise. She had never considered Maggie's financial influence over her father. "But first," Maggie continued, "I want to hear this confession directly from Zoe, with witnesses present." "She'll never admit it in front of you," Morgan said. "Perhaps not willingly." Maggie's eyes gleamed with determination. "But I have ways of making people speak truth in my presence." The plan they formulated was bold. Maggie would call a family meeting at her home that evening, insisting on William, Rebecca, and Zoe's attendance. Eleanor would accompany Morgan, providing support and witnessing whatever transpired. "What about recording the conversation?" Eleanor suggested. "Ohio is a one-party consent state," Maggie confirmed. "We can and will record everything." As they parted, Maggie hugged Morgan again, whispering, "I failed you by not seeing this sooner. That ends today." The hours until the meeting crawled by with excruciating slowness. Morgan changed outfits 3 times, wanting to appear strong and composed rather than vulnerable. Eleanor made a light dinner that neither of them ate. "Remember," Eleanor advised as they prepared to leave, "no matter what happens, you have options, you have support, you are not alone." They arrived at Maggie's imposing house at precisely 7 o'clock. The housekeeper showed them into the formal living room where Maggie waited alone. "William and Rebecca are on their way," she informed them. "They don't know you'll be here, Morgan. I thought the element of surprise would be useful." Morgan nodded, her throat too dry for speech. The elegant room with its antique furniture and oil paintings felt like a stage set for a confrontation she both dreaded and desperately needed. At 7:15, the doorbell rang. Morgan's heart hammered in her chest as she heard her parents' voices in the hallway, then footsteps approaching. William entered first, then Rebecca. They both froze at the sight of Morgan. "What is this?" William demanded, turning to his mother. "You didn't say she would be here." "Sit down, William," Maggie commanded. "You too, Rebecca. We're having a family discussion." "We have nothing to discuss," William said coldly. "Morgan ran away. She's been lying to her teachers, causing scenes at school." "Stop." Maggie's voice cut through his like a blade. "Not another word until Zoe arrives." "Zoe, why bring her into this?" Rebecca asked, glancing nervously between Morgan and Eleanor. "All will become clear," Maggie replied. "Ah, here she is now." Zoe entered the room, her confident stride faltering when she spotted Morgan. "What's going on? Why is she here?" "Sit down, Zoe." Maggie pointed to a chair directly across from Morgan. "We're going to have a conversation about truth today." William began to protest again, but Maggie silenced him with a look. "You've had your say for years, William. Now it's my turn to speak." She turned to Zoe. "I want to ask you a direct question, and I expect a truthful answer. Did you take money from your father's wallet and plant it under Morgan's pillow?" Zoe's face paled. "What? No, of course not." "Really?" Maggie reached for her phone and pressed play. Zoe's voice filled the room. "I got rid of her. Took some money from Dad's wallet, hid it under her pillow, then pretended I saw her steal it. Mom and Dad totally bought it. They threw her out that same night." Rebecca gasped. William's face darkened with fury. Zoe looked stricken, her mouth opening and closing without sound. That's fake," she stammered finally. She made that up. It was recorded at my birthday dinner last week, Maggie said evenly. You were talking to Blake in the sunroom. I have witnesses who can verify the conversation took place. It doesn't matter, William interjected. Morgan has been causing problems for years. This incident was just the final straw. The final straw, Morgan found her voice at last. You threw me out into the cold with nothing but a garbage bag of clothes. I had nowhere to go. I slept in a park the first night. Do you have any idea what could have happened to me? What almost did happen? You're being dramatic, William dismissed. You obviously found somewhere to stay. After weeks of homelessness, Morgan shot back, after sleeping in libraries and gas stations, after being abandoned by everyone who should have protected me. Rebecca looked stricken. You were homeless, but I thought you were staying with friends. What friends, Mom? Everyone was too afraid of Dad to help me for more than a night or two. A heavy silence fell over the room. Maggie let it stretch before speaking again. Here is what will happen now, she said with quiet authority. Morgan will continue to stay with Eleanor, who has provided the safe home you failed to maintain. Zoe will begin therapy immediately to address her concerning behavior, and you, William, and Rebecca will both participate in family counseling if you ever hope to repair this relationship. You can't dictate, William began. I can and I will, Maggie cut him off. Unless you'd prefer I go public with this story, I'm sure the hospital board and your pharmaceutical clients would be fascinated to learn how you treat your own daughter. William's face flushed dark red. You wouldn't dare. Try me. Maggie's voice was ice. Additionally, I'll be adjusting the terms of the family trust to ensure Morgan's education is fully funded, independent of your control. And there will be a formal apology to Morgan both privately and publicly. Publicly, Rebecca whispered. Yes, the damage to Morgan's reputation must be addressed. A public statement acknowledging the false accusation and expressing regret for the misunderstanding. Morgan watched in amazement as her father, always so commanding and intimidating, seemed to shrink under Maggie's unwavering gaze. She had never seen him yield to anyone before. And what about me? Zoe asked, her voice small. Are you sending me away? No, Maggie said more gently. But you will take responsibility for your actions, starting with the truth right now. Zoe looked down at her hands, then up at Morgan. I did it, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I took the money and put it under your pillow. I wanted you gone. Why? Morgan asked the question that had haunted her for weeks. We're sisters. Because everyone loves you, Zoe burst out. Teachers, friends, even stupid Blake and his friends. Everyone thinks you're so talented and special. Do you know what it's like to always be compared to you? Why can't you be creative like Morgan? Where's your special talent? I'm so tired of being invisible next to you. The raw pain in Zoe's voice caught Morgan off guard. Despite everything, she felt a flicker of compassion for her sister. I never knew you felt that way, she said quietly. But what you did, it wasn't just mean, Zoe. It was dangerous. I could have been hurt or worse. I didn't think about that, Zoe admitted. I just wanted you gone from the house. I didn't think about where you'd go. That's the problem, Maggie interjected. None of you thought about the consequences of your actions. William, Rebecca, you threw your 16-year-old daughter out into the night without ensuring she had safe shelter. That's not just poor parenting. It's potentially criminal neglect. William and Rebecca exchanged glances, the gravity of the situation finally seeming to sink in. What do you want us to do? Rebecca asked, her voice subdued. First, acknowledge what really happened, Maggie said. No more lies about Morgan running away or causing trouble. Then issue a formal apology to Morgan, to her school, to anyone who heard the false rumors. And after that, William asked stiffly, after that, it's up to Morgan. Maggie turned to her granddaughter. What do you need to feel safe and whole again? Morgan considered the question carefully. What did she need? Not just an apology, though, that was important. Not just acknowledgement of the truth, though that was essential. What she truly needed was something deeper. I need to know this won't happen again, she said finally, to me or to anyone else. I need to know that my voice matters in this family, that my truth is as important as anyone else's. William looked away, clearly uncomfortable with the demand. Rebecca nodded slowly. "And I need time," Morgan continued. "I'm not ready to come home. I don't know if I'll ever be ready, but I need the freedom to make that decision for myself when and if I feel safe enough to do so." "That seems entirely reasonable," Maggie approved. "Don't you agree, William, Rebecca?" After a long moment, William nodded stiffly. Rebecca wiped away tears. "We never meant for this to happen," she said. "We never thought about where you would go." "That's the problem, Mom," Morgan replied. "You didn't think about me at all." The meeting continued for another hour, hammering out the details of the agreement. William would write a formal letter to the school clarifying that Morgan had not stolen anything and had left home due to a family misunderstanding that was now being addressed. Rebecca would contact the parents in their social circle, who might have heard rumors setting the record straight. Zoe would apologize to Morgan in writing and begin weekly therapy sessions. Most importantly, Morgan would continue living with Eleanor for as long as she chose with regular family counseling sessions, as a condition for any potential reconciliation. As they prepared to leave, Maggie pulled Morgan aside. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "You've shown remarkable strength through all of this." "I had help," Morgan acknowledged, glancing at Eleanor, who waited patiently by the door. "Yes, you did, and that's another lesson learned sometimes. Family is who we choose, not just who we're born to." On the drive home, Morgan was quiet, processing the events of the evening. Eleanor respected her silence, offering presents without demands. It wasn't until they were back in the kitchen, Eleanor making tea, that Morgan finally spoke. "I never thought they'd admit it, especially my father." "Your grandmother is quite formidable," Eleanor observed, "and she had the advantage of irrefutable evidence. Do you think they'll keep their promises?" "I think your grandmother will ensure they do." Eleanor handed Morgan a steaming mug. "How do you feel?" Morgan considered the question. Relieved, validated, but also sad. She looked up at Eleanor. "Is that strange? To feel sad when I got what I wanted?" "Not at all. You're grieving the family you should have had all along, the parents who should have protected you without needing evidence or ultimatums." Morgan nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I don't know if I can ever trust them again." "That's something only time will tell," Eleanor said gently. "For now, focus on healing. Everything else can wait." In the weeks that followed, Morgan watched with cautious optimism as her family kept their word. William's letter to the school led to a meeting with the principal, who formally apologized to Morgan for believing rumors without investigation. Rebecca's clarifications through their social circle gradually shifted the narrative, though whispers still followed Morgan through school hallways. The most significant change came from Zoe. After several therapy sessions, she approached Morgan at school one day, asking to talk. "I know you probably hate me," she began awkwardly. "I wouldn't blame you if you did." "I don't hate you," Morgan replied truthfully. "I don't understand you, but I don't hate you." "My therapist says I have something called competitive sibling syndrome," Zoe explained, "plus some pretty serious insecurity issues." She attempted a smile. "Apparently being the favorite at home doesn't fix everything." "Who would have guessed?" Morgan said dryly. "Anyway, I'm sorry. Really sorry. What I did was horrible, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm working on being less horrible in general." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was sincere. Morgan nodded, accepting it for what it was. The family counseling sessions were more challenging. Sitting across from her parents, articulating the pain of years of favoritism and the trauma of her homelessness required a strength Morgan hadn't known she possessed. William remained defensive at first, reluctant to acknowledge his role. Rebecca cried often, her guilt manifesting as emotional outbursts that sometimes derailed productive conversation. Yet slowly, painfully, understanding began to emerge. William admitted that Morgan's artistic nature reminded him of his mother, whom he had both loved and resented for prioritizing her painting over financial stability during his childhood. Rebecca confessed her fear of William's anger had led her to enable his unequal treatment of their daughters. "I failed you," she told Morgan during one particularly difficult session. "I should have protected you." I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. Through it all, Eleanor remained Morgan's rock, offering wisdom, support, and a safe home to return to after emotionally draining family encounters. As winter melted into spring, Morgan's life stabilized into a new normal. She continued living with Eleanor while maintaining cautious contact with her family. Her photography flourished with Ms. Reeves, encouraging her to apply for a prestigious summer workshop in New York. On a warm April afternoon, Morgan sat on Eleanor's porch sorting through prints for her portfolio application. Eleanor brought out lemonade and settled into the chair beside her. "These are extraordinary," she commented, examining a series of portraits Morgan had taken of the homeless community, including Henry and Gloria. "You've captured something profound here." "I want to call it the invisible," Morgan explained. "A record of the people society chooses not to see." "Very fitting." Eleanor sipped her lemonade. "Your grandmother called today. She's secured your spot in the workshop, all expenses paid." Morgan smiled. Her relationship with Maggie had deepened considerably over the past months, revealing a shared artistic sensibility and determination. "She didn't need to do that. I wanted to get in on my own merit." "You did," Eleanor assured her. "Maggie merely handled the financial aspects after you were accepted." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the neighborhood children play across the street. Morgan's thoughts drifted to how much had changed since that cold October night, when she had stood barefoot in her driveway clutching a garbage bag of belongings. "Do you ever think about going home?" Eleanor asked, as if reading her thoughts. Morgan considered the question. "Sometimes. Things are better with my family now, but—" She hesitated. "This feels like home now. With you." Eleanor's eyes softened. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need. Or want." "What if that's forever?" Morgan asked, half joking. "Then we'll need to turn the guest room into a proper dark room," Eleanor replied without missing a beat. "Your photography equipment is taking over the bathroom." Morgan laughed, feeling a surge of gratitude for this woman who had offered shelter when she needed it most, and then unexpectedly had become the mother figure she had always craved. Later that evening, as she updated the journal Eleanor had given her on that first night, Morgan reflected on her journey. She had lost a home, but found a sanctuary. She had experienced betrayal, but discovered unexpected allies. She had been rendered invisible, but had found her voice again stronger and clearer than before. On the final page of her entry, Morgan wrote, "Some wounds never fully heal, but they can become part of your strength. I am no longer the girl who stood trembling in the cold, believing herself worthless. I am the woman who survived, who learned to trust her own truth, who found her voice in the darkness. And that voice will never be silenced again."